Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. On today's pod, we have someone who has gone from being a merchant mariner to a product manager at Machine Robotics, Arthur Seaman. Arthur is a product manager, government and compliance at Machine Robotics. Additionally, he has his master's ticket and sailed for OSG on the Jones Act fleet and is a fellow SUNY Maritime alumni, the first one on this pod. Machine Robotics is the leading provider of advanced technology for the marine and maritime sector with a product line of autonomous control and navigation systems for commercial boats and ships. Machine's base is on the historic waterfront of East Boston, Massachusetts. Arthur, welcome to the podcast and thanks for coming on.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of how you got into the general maritime business.
As you mentioned, I'm a graduate of Fort Schuyler at State University of New York, Maritime College. I sailed on tankers in the Jones Act MSP fleet for about 9 years after graduating. Obtained my unlimited master's license, went back to grad school, got my MBA, and then joined the talented team at Machine Robotics in Boston last summer. So it's been a fun several months with them now, coming up on a year.
What made you get interested into going into technology? It used to be, I had a very similar, though you sailed much longer than I did. I sailed for about 4 years. Actually, I started off as an AB, worked my way up to second mate, and then I had an opportunity to come ashore and got into the regular. I did a little scheduling. I did actually some ISO, ISM implementation, and then I pivoted a little bit to marketing, but eventually I ended up on a chartering desk. What made you kind of, instead of taking that quote unquote very traditional route, what made you pivot into the technology world where, you're now in, really in the forefront of moving the business forward?
Well, technology is everywhere. Without it, we wouldn't be talking to each other right now. And we certainly wouldn't have anybody on the other side listening. And I really saw while I was at sea the evolution of technology beginning over the course of the last decade. When I got out of school, ECDIS was not in force. We were navigating on paper charts. There was no internet on board the vessels. On some tankers, there was still a lot of manual valves and parts of the cargo loading system. It became apparent as time went on that technology was about to play a tremendously transformative role in our industry. The maritime industry has always adopted primitive forms of technology through radars and emergency communications equipment, sat phones, but nothing anywhere close to what we're capable of today. Couple that with the size of vessels increasing, carrying more cargo, more oil, more passengers, more risk. I started to see a future where technology, both literally and figuratively, would take the wheel in our industry, following trends in aviation, medicine, and finance.
That's a great point because my first job for a very long time was actually, turning actually valves on deck and listening to pumps as they were getting close to finishing pumps, finishing a tank or something like that, and then giving the wave to the AB, on one tank over to open up a valve or to close a valve or whatever. So it was a very different time. And certainly I've seen that change take place from afar. So you're right. It is becoming more part of the everyday life. And certainly even in the decade that you've been on, I'm sure that you've seen the changes here. When you started to look around and you started to look at different opportunities, what attracted you to where you're at today in the autonomous ship industry? Because I think it's actually a very, not seamless, but certainly a really good fit for someone who has experience at sea, whether it's engineering side or deck side. I think there is a really good fit there. Could you explain kind of your logic on jumping into that in particular?
So, with Sea Machines being based in Boston, I live fairly close, just up the coast, across the border in New Hampshire. And, I had seen some of the projects that they were working on. It really just seemed like a company that was on the cutting edge of really this like rapid change that is occurring in the maritime space. And being that they were so close, based in the US, there was not a whole lot of this kind of work being done really on this side of the Atlantic, where a lot of these larger companies had segments or arms in Europe. So it really seemed like a natural fit where I was attracted to the work they were doing. The location was fantastic. And I really saw this as a future path in the industry, something that would make a shoreside transition that much easier.
I wanted to ask you in particular because I'm a product manager as well, and I think a lot of people, certainly I didn't know what product management was up until 3 4 years ago. How do you find that transition? Because product managers do a little bit of everything. You know, you work with the technology side to make sure that they're doing their things correctly. You work with strategy to make sure that the overall strategy of the company is moving in the right direction, marketing, sales, customer support. And tell me a little bit about your transition there, because I know for me it was even though I was ashore for a while, it was still a new experience.
It's such a dynamic position, and my role in product management is a bit different given that, most of our industry and certainly the autonomous and AI shipping space is a bit different than most. So I have a lot of interaction with the class societies like Bureau Veritas, ABS, Lloyd's, the US Coast Guard, and other regulatory bodies such as Transport Canada or the Danish Maritime Authority. I engage with stakeholders from across our industry, from harbor pilots and mariners to owner operators and admiralty lawyers. I spend time in Washington, D.C., as well as at the IMO. So it has really and truly been a dynamic role of both internal and external stakeholder engagement. And as you know, the role of a product manager includes everything from researching market needs to setting the vision, mission, and goals to communicating that vision to stakeholders. But really working for a small but growing startup has enabled me to work hand in hand with our development team, spend time on our test boats on the water, and even spend time testing the product, electronic testing labs. So it really has just been a wide breadth of experience, which I'm very grateful to have.
Something I do want to ask you, and it kind of I started to think about this a little bit as you were talking, and mostly about your transition ashore, as well as you mentioned the technology even a decade ago was very different on the ships. Going back to our kind of shared experience as SUNY Maritime alumni, what do you think the schools need to do to prepare sailors or people in our industry? Because I know a lot of the schools, Maritime, SUNY Maritime, Mass Maritime, they all have options now. I'm not sure about Maine and A&M and Cal, but I know that those two at least have non-sailing degree tracks, which I think is a great thing. But how do you see those schools preparing their mariners and business people coming into the industry, deck or engine, to deal with this technology? What do you see them doing, and what do you see them need to be doing? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I think that that's really preparing the workforce for whether it's autonomous ships or being a product manager or getting involved in that is a real, I guess, challenge, because all the companies need the expertise, the maritime expertise, but then also they have to, I think, have a little bit of level of comfort with technology. What's your thought?
The school's biggest advantage for them is their ability to engage with alumni, with industry, and really by reaching out to industry today is probably the best thing that they could do for the future of the school, the cadets. What we've seen here over the last 10 years and what we're going to see in the coming decade is, just this, I mentioned it before, this rapid transformative shift in technology across lots of industries. But for us to be able to keep up with this in the maritime space, it's evolving at such a pace that, and we could write a course today, or present some level of technology or software. And in 2 or 3 years, it's not even relevant anymore. So the best thing that they can do is continue to stay engaged. I had the privilege to head down to our alma mater, SUNY Maritime College, 2 weeks ago and speak with the students, speak with the faculty. There was just a lot of excitement over what the future holds, because the traditional options of deck, engine, shoreside for a shipping company have now really expanded, because the ability to connect remotely, the ability to really look at a lot of things much, much differently than we have traditionally viewed them in the maritime space, I think has really excited a lot of people. And, I know the cadets have really wanted to learn more about it. I'm excited to see where this goes over the next couple of years, and hopefully standing up some training platforms and some more formal education behind software and AI at the maritime schools.
I agree. I think that the engagement of our industry is probably one of the biggest things that we can do as an industry to any and all of the schools, keep them engaged. And it's not just a matter of, like you said, you teach them some platform. Uh, okay, great. They have a little bit of an advantage, but understanding what's happening, understanding that the navigation courses or the engineering courses that they take, those will never materially change, but it's the application of those courses. Whether it's, yes, I'm going to still work on a ship, but like you said, Ectus was not really used. Now it is. That's changed. The other part of this is the data for all of that, what to do with it, what decisions to make, emissions control, how to take all that data and make better emissions decisions, right? On routing, trading patterns. This all ties into having a basic understanding of the maritime industry, how to apply it, and what roles. And like you said, you're not just defined on, I have to go sail third mate, I have to go sail third assistant engineer, and then I can come in and become a superintendent. No, no, no. You could do that, and then you become a product manager, you become an engineer at a software company and do something different. Not an engineer in the sense of programming bits and bytes, but become a sales engineer where you're going out and helping them troubleshoot. And I do think that, number one, I really like that idea of maintaining that industry involvement. And the schools have always been good about keeping industry involvement with the ship owners and the major charters and major engineering companies, major naval architecture firms. But now it's keeping involved with not just the major firms in the technology side, but the small startups, and understanding what's happening, because that's another valuable tool.
It is, and there's so much innovation there in the startup space, and there's just so much out there that as a cadet or as a student, whether it's maritime school or otherwise, that you just don't even think about, you don't even consider, and it's just opening up those possibilities for what the future holds, and for what kind of employment exists out there beyond the walls of the university. So I'm grateful to be involved on that front, and hope to stay involved there and help them in whatever way that we can.
Tell us a little bit about what Sea Machines is doing, because I think that when people hear autonomous vessels, they have a lot of different preconceived notions. In a broader stroke, give us an idea of what you guys are bringing to the table, where you're at today, kind of what you're bringing further. And then we could talk about the other question, which was where I was going to start with, is how is this received when you come into people's offices and say, this is what we can do for you?
Absolutely. So at Sea Machines, we focus on building and developing autonomous command and control, as well as advanced perception systems for both the marine and maritime industries at large. So we build autonomous vessel software systems, which help increase the safety, efficiency, and performance of ships, workboats, commercial passenger vessels, you name it. The common misconception is that autonomy means unmanned, and it doesn't. And that has been one of the largest hurdles that we've had to overcome, is just the general education and knowledge surrounding the space, because there's a lot of misconceptions. I think to overcome this, talking about the truth of what autonomy really is and how it works, and how this technology that we develop ultimately empower us as humans to be able to do things that we simply can't do on our own. So it's not about removing people from the equation. Autonomous vessel technology can help elevate seafarers from controllers to commanders, putting them at the highest level of task and systems management. Because as ships have gotten larger, crews have gotten smaller, autonomy and AI products have the ability to make our lives as seafarers easier. And that's a very important point that we've really tried to communicate better as an industry, and I think it's starting now to really be received that way.
I think that one of the problems that you're going to run into, and you kind of touched upon it briefly, is going to be, well, you want to get rid of mariners, and you're going to run into problems, especially I'm speaking in the U.S., with unions. I mean, maybe even parts of the EU, Germany and other places. All of a sudden, you're getting rid of mariners. This becomes a problem. But the way that you're framing it is, no, the mariners are still there. We're just making your life a little bit easier. The other question to that I have is not only easier, but Talk to me a little bit about safety, because I think that is always a concern, is seafarers, well-being as well as safety. Talk a little bit about how the approach at Sea Machines, also tackles that.
As an industry, if we are serious about safety and also serious about reducing our carbon footprint, reducing the impacts of global warming, we must embrace this technology. Technology can help mariners in conducting what we like to call the dirty, dull, dangerous, or demeaning tasks that we sometimes need to undertake. It can help companies with reporting requirements, aspects of fleet management, business forecasting based upon sound and reliable data. But companies that are not leveraging autonomy and AI to their advantage in the coming decade will be outcompeted and out-earned by those that are. The ability to implement things like functions such as autonomous path planning and collision avoidance can really go a long way in the prevention of a lot of accidents. And, we really hope to be able to remove the human error while maintaining the human element in this technology. So with a lot of these decision support and, autonomous navigation systems, we're able to hopefully strike that perfect balance between what we have today with a lot of manual tasks and what we see as a future state with different levels of autonomy and autonomous functions on board vessels of all sizes.
That balance between some of the routine things and things that maybe the users aren't seeing or could do better, and giving them the ability to be in control and in command, not just doing the task. And I think that that's really what you're aiming at. Talk a little bit about where the company's at today, where the product is deployed, and what kind of testing is being done at this point, and a little bit about like what size ships, because we do see articles pop up, I would say, on a weekly basis about ships, maybe not necessarily with your company, but with other companies in Europe specifically being tested with this type of technology. Talk a little bit about that, because I'm really curious to hear how you're doing and what the progress is.
So last year we conducted a 1,000-mile autonomous voyage around Denmark that we termed the Machine Odyssey. To your earlier point, we engaged with the labor union AMO, American Maritime Officers, and they crewed our remote control room during this voyage. And we had 2 mariners from AMO in our control room in Boston, remotely commanding and, when needed or at times, controlling the tug over in Denmark. I was one of the captains on board the tugboat for the couple weeks we were over there. And that demonstrated our SM300 product. The tug industry, the general workboat, offshore supply vessels, a lot of these supply vessels coming out for the wind field, that is definitely a growing market for this kind of technology. You see it with any time these vessels are running repetitive routes over and over again inside of harbors, just offshore. You can leverage 4G networks, which makes a cost-effective way to connect. Certainly more so than satellite right now, but that's quickly changing. From that, in that small to medium-sized commercial space, we've got partnerships with Rolls-Royce and with Hamilton Jet, OEM partnership with those 2 organizations. They have been phenomenal to work with. That has brought us into the yacht market. We've worked with Maersk on our computer vision system and had achieved an approval in principle on an AI computer vision system, part of a product that's soon to be launched here in the coming weeks. It really spans the breadth of the industry. And for specific products, they certainly focus on more segmented areas of the industry. But these are items that can be applied across the board, from everything from a recreational vessel. We've got 3 test boats in Boston, all the way up to container ships when it comes to computer vision and some of our other situational awareness enhancing sensors.
It sounds like you're moving right along, and certainly have some really big names between Rolls-Royce and of course Maersk, who is very technology forward, not only on their container side, but I know they're doing a lot on the tanker side, especially on the data and what they're trying to do as well. When you go into an office and you're speaking to somebody, maybe for the first time, or maybe they kind of know who you are and you're pitching their product, at what point do they have the aha moment? They go, okay, this is not this kind of black box boogeyman sort of thing, but this is actually something that can work for us and work for us well. When do you think that they have that aha moment?
So we have the capability to remotely demo a lot of our products with our test fleet. Often, whether they come visit us at our headquarters in Boston or we're out in the field talking to them, that aha moment really comes when they see it for the first time in front of them, whether it's again remotely done on a demo or they're on the boat themselves. And then I think it really puts it into perspective, and it's sort of a reality check of like, wow, this is not just something that's talked about, but it's used and deployed. And there's customers all over the world and major companies that are adopting this technology on varying levels. And I think that's really where the power and potential for them lie. And they start to see it and say, yeah, this is the way to go. This is clearly the future, and utilize a lot of this in our business. There's a lot of value here.
And speaking of that value, where do you see the value proposition of your company, let's say, not in the immediate 12 to 18 months, but, wearing your product manager hat, you sometimes look at roadmaps and strategy 2, 3 years, 5 years down the road, maybe a little bit of a reach. But what do you see kind of the next step for not just your company, but for, autonomous systems in our industry? What do you see as that next step?
If I had a crystal ball, I would say in the next 10 years that we will see rolled out across the vast majority of commercial vessels some form of autonomous technology on the bridge, whether that's a computer vision system, advanced sensors, full autonomy package, or onboard pilot assist. The trajectory that this is taking, the IMO is taking this very seriously with their guidance on MASS, NASS, or the Maritime Autonomous Surface Ships. I really see it expanding broadly across the industry. And again, it can be integrated into vessels that we see now. We're not talking about completely redesigning how every single ship in the world looks and operates, but really being able to do things better than we're doing it today and more efficiently. And that's going to be key. Again, if we're serious about meeting some of these climate goals that the IMO has set forth.
Yeah, and maybe that's where getting people's heads turned around, ESG and of course safety. I think everybody looks at how can you make the sailor's life safer, right? Because we do still see a ton of accidents at sea, whether it's individual deaths or running aground, which we just saw recently on the running aground side. When this podcast is being recorded earlier this week, that the Evergreen ship just got floated in the Chesapeake, and you start to wonder: could there have been some systems in place, maybe some more AI autonomous type systems that could help prevent those sort of incidents from happening? Again, you have a ship that's that large navigating waters. You always wonder, what could be done better to make not only the sailor's life safer, but to prevent these marine incidents.
From both a navigation standpoint, a maintenance standpoint, and really being able to track maintenance, free up resources on board the vessel to conduct more maintenance. That's typically an item that's left out of the conversation, is how important that is and how much that contributes to marine casualties at sea, when things go wrong.
When you get pushback, is there any other downside that people point to in an autonomous ships that you guys are trying to address in a positive way?
You see people often who fight against the technology for the wrong reasons, and often any naysayers that are out there likely have never used it. And that's why whenever I'm out and engaging, I always invite people, if you're in Boston, give us a call, come stop by. We would love to show it to you, answer some of the questions and really help people learn what this is all about. Because often so some of the most negative opinions come from those who've never used it, and they don't know anyone working for a company like Seaman. So if you have that opportunity, please come by. We'd love to show you what we do, and and really hope to broaden the scope of learning.
I think that's a great way, because people are afraid of the unknown, and they're afraid of losing their jobs, and they're afraid of well, this isn't going to work, or for autonomous ships, they're afraid of a Skynet type thing like the Terminator. I'm sure that that's what people worry about, especially with technology like this. But I think there is such a good upside, and there is ways to address all of that. And it sounds like you guys are doing a really good job and taking the right steps. So that should be congratulated as well. But as we start to wrap up, one of the things I always like to ask my guests is not necessarily a trick question, but what are you reading these days, or kind of getting into?
I'm reading a book right now called The Age of AI and Our Human Future. It's by Kissinger, Schmidt, and Butenlacher. And it's an excellent read for even non-tech oriented people who can really understand, appreciate, and learn from it. And I'm almost done with the book. I highly recommend it. It really talks about just the AI technology space at large. It's not maritime centric, but there's a lot to learn from that. It's been great.
I'm actually reading a book that I think kind of spoke to me. I just finished reading a book that really spoke to me only by the name of the title. And I got into it and I realized that it was very much something that I can relate to. It's called Range by David Epstein. The subtitle is Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. And they have a lot of really interesting kind of thoughts just talking about being specialized. They talk a little bit about in sports context and other places, but being specialized maybe isn't always the best thing, because you have a broad base of experiences, you can actually bring that broad-based experience to your company or to a relationship or to other things. And I certainly find that from my own personal experiences, that having the different experiences working in the maritime industry, it was a lot of commercial, but in different ways. And now pivoting into a digital company, I'm not a digital expert. I understand some code or how code works, but I don't need to write it. But I think it definitely adds value. And I think that it sounds like you're doing the same thing. You don't need to necessarily write the code or write the AI, but you need to understand from what you're doing, how it's supposed to function, and then get it to function. And I think that was a good book, and a lot of things that I've picked up along the way there.
Most definitely.
Well, Arthur, thank you very much for the chat. We always do appreciate it, and wish you best of luck. And it was great to talk to you and learn about what you're doing, as well as kind of share your views, especially on not only technology, but how we can build technology better and a little less scary, and what needs to be done at the schools. I think that was something that I haven't explored before, and I thought it was really interesting to talk about. So thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chris. And if you're ever in Boston, please stop by. We'll get you out on the water, and we'll have a day.
Oh, I would love to do that. Yeah, I would love to get out in the water and just see how that works. So I do appreciate it. Thanks again, Arthur.
Thank you.
That was Arthur Seaman giving his take on autonomous shipping, how he transitioned from a seafaring position to a product management role, and what the maritime schools should be doing to prep their students on the future of shipping. I hope that you found the podcast informative and subscribe to it on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and most other places you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like us and tell your friends. Thanks again. I'm Chris Aversano, your host, wishing you fair winds and following seas.